Each of these handhelds I would consider to be a premium Android-based device. They all have the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 processor inside, so it really comes down to just the matter of size and other features. And you'd think it's a pretty easy. So if you're on the fence about one of these three models, I'm hoping this video will put you on the right track. Without any further delay, the Odin2 Mini, and then work our way up to the bigger handhelds. And I think that in terms of ergonomics, the Odin2 Mini is actually surprisingly good. Like I mentioned before, it's more rounded along the edges, and so it's very easy to be able to shift your hand down to be able to reach any of the controls. In particular, I found this to be surprisingly good when it comes to D-pad centric gaming. It's one of my favorite, self-squinting with a 5-inch screen. In addition, when it comes to emulating some of the higher end systems, the device does get quite warm even with the fan on. And so that's one of the reasons why I mostly just play PS2 and GameCube on this device in particular. And when it comes to playing more modern games, like twin stick shooter style games, I found that this shape in particular is actually not very good because you don't have any grips on the bottom. This is a very flat device. And so it's kind of like how it was with the PS Vita in that you just don't have anything to grab onto here on the bottom. So when you start to use these shoulders and triggers, it makes everything just kind of feel a little bit top heavy. For those types of games, I would recommend looking into a 3D printed grip. You can usually get these for around $30 on Etsy, and there's a variety of different ones out there. I've been using this one. I'll leave it linked down below. Now, the way this works is you just basically pop the device in and voila, you've got like full grips right here. And so all those problems before where you didn't have anything to hold on to just magically go away, but it does make the device quite a bit bigger. It kind of takes away from the whole mini thing. At that point, you've got a device that's about the same size as the Odin2 in terms of just overall volume, but it has a smaller screen. And so I would say that between the two, I'd rather play on the Odin2. But this is a nice alternative. If you already have the Odin2 Mini and you want to play some more modern games and make them more comfortable, a $30 fix like this is pretty great. One other nitpick I have about this device is the start and select placement are down here, and I find that to be just a little bit less comfortable than the other two devices, which have them up here by the top of the screen like on the Nintendo Switch. And so this is something that has annoyed me about this device over time. It's just that I have to reach down here to press select and start. And to be fair, that's the same placement as the PS Vita, so I think they were just trying to honor that design, but still, yeah, it's a little bit annoying. Now, in terms of ergonomics, I think that the original Odin2 is a pretty good compromise in middle ground. This one does have an ergonomic grip on the back. In fact, it's actually quite big, and so I find this to work well in a variety of different use cases. For example, I can play retro games on it, or something like GameCube with a single analog stick, but then also I can play more modern games, even with these shoulders and triggers. My main complaint about the ergonomics on this have to do with the D-pad and the right analog stick, which again, I wish they were a little bit more inboard. That would make them easier to reach. So I think among the three devices, when it comes to D-pad-centric gaming, this one is probably the worst of the bunch, but still not terrible. In general, I would say this one probably has the widest range in ergonomic comfort without having to resort to an external grip. Now, the Odin2 Portal is a very roomy device. It's a lot larger, so I have a lot of access right here. So it's very comfortable to be able to use it with a D-pad or analog sticks and even more modern games. My only complaint here has to do with those shallow grips and the fact that it feels relatively flat. Now, thankfully, AYN recognized this as well, and they actually offer this grip right here. I think it's under $20, and this is a TPU rubber grip, but it fits right into the Odin2 Portal and completely transforms these ergonomics because it gives it a full-size grip. And so personally, I just put this grip on my Odin2 Portal at all times, and I never take it off, and I love it. And the thing is that I don't really mind having a grip on this device because this is a large device, so I already expect it to be large. And so adding a grip to this is not a big deal for me compared to like the Odin2 Mini, where one of its selling points is the fact that it's so small. So in this case, yeah, I put the grip on my Odin2 Portal and all of my ergonomic complaints just vanish away. And so this is a very comfortable handheld to use, but I would put that caveat on there that I do think it needs the grip, at least for me. In particular, I think this handheld is very comfortable when it comes to analog stick and trigger gameplay, so I love using this for game streaming. Now let's talk about the screen, and these all three are very different. So we've got different sizes, 5, 6, 7 inches, but then also mini LED, LCD, and then AMOLED. These two have a 60 Hz refresh rate, while this one is 120, and they also have varying degrees of brightness and dimness. The Odin2 Mini gets up to 1100 nits brightness, whereas the Odin2 Portal gets up to 800, and I'm not really sure what the Odin2 is. They actually don't show it in their spec sheet, but I would guess it's somewhere around like 500 instead. And here's what they look like at max brightness. So you can see that, yeah, the mini LED on the Odin2 Mini is just like so bright, like it's washing out everything. And then also the Odin2 Portal is very bright too, definitely too bright, whereas the Odin2 is still bright, but not compared to the other two. And here we are at minimum brightness, and you can see that both the Odin2 and the Odin2 Portal are so dark that you can barely see them, whereas the Odin2 Mini is a little bit brighter. So among the three, I would say that, yeah, these two are going to be better for playing in a pitch black environment. In fact, turning off the studio lights here, you can see that, yeah, these two are about the same. I would say that maybe the Odin2 is a little bit brighter, but yes, they are very dim, whereas the Odin2 Mini is not quite there. I still think they're all pretty good to be able to play in the dark, but yeah, the Odin2 Mini is definitely going to be brighter among them. Now, when it comes to playing outdoors, the Odin2 Mini definitely does get brighter than the other two, but I don't think it looks as good in a sunny environment. I think part of it has to do with the fact that the mini LED blacks are not super dark compared to the other two, and so I found that just in general, the screen looks a little bit washed out. Now, in terms of brightness, the Odin2 definitely is not as bright as the other two, but I still think it's bright enough to be able to play outdoors. Maybe not in direct sunlight the entire time, but it still gets pretty bright. Among the three, if I was to play outside, I would pick the Odin2 Portal every single time. This thing is both bright, but then also looks very good as well. And so not only can I see the screen very easily, even in direct sunlight, but also the colors come through as well. And so yes, this is probably the best experience among the three when playing outdoors. Let's do a couple comparisons with Stardew Valley. So first, I want to talk about the vignetting that you can find on the Odin2 Mini. And this is pretty common with mini LED screens where you will have a darker image around the edges of the screen. And you can see it here in this example. There's like a black line along the left right here with Stardew Valley, which you're not seeing on the LCD panel as well as the OLED one. And so this amount of vignetting may or may not bother you. It kind of gives a cinematic feel to everything, but if you're looking for something that looks a little bit more clear and even, then these two screens are definitely better in that regard. Another thing worth noting between these three screens is that in order to get a somewhat even brightness here, just in like a standard indoor environment, it is using different brightness levels. We'll start with the Odin2 Portal, which I think probably looks the best among the three, and this one is using about a 40%, maybe 45% overall brightness. And that's about right when I'm playing this device. It's usually somewhere between like 30 and 50% brightness no matter where I am. Now the Odin2 has a max average brightness a little bit brighter. So you can see I have to go up here to like 75-80% brightness to match the 45% or so here with the Odin2 Portal. Now the Odin2 Mini is kind of all over the place. You might be surprised at how bright this one is right here. It's at about like 20% brightness. But the crazy thing is that there never really seems to be the perfect brightness when using the screen. For example, if we go any further up, it will start to get super washed out. Like look at how bad the colors are. You can barely see the colors once you get too bright. Meanwhile, if you start going below that, it gets really dim and still the colors are not very good either. And so it's hard to find a good match between these in terms of the amount of brightness, but then also getting a nice amount of color. You can see that still, even here, the brightness is about the same between the two, maybe a little bit too bright, but the colors are not there either. It's totally washed out. So when it comes to the practical use of these screens, I find that the Odin2 Portal is probably the best among them. I mean, the fact that it has a pretty even grade between dimness and brightness, and then the Odin2 is still pretty good, but requires a higher grade to actually get to something normal, and then the Odin2 Mini is just kind of all over the place. So yes, in a nutshell, I think that the mini LED is a little bit too washed out and the colors don't really make sense to me. The Odin2 is comparatively dull compared to the other two, but I don't really mind that when I'm playing it on its own. And then the Odin2 Portal is definitely the best screen of the bunch. One final thing worth noting about the Odin2 Portal that I mentioned in my reviews is that this device will have a little bit of like a green hue when you get down to the lower brightnesses, and it's really hard to see, but something I demonstrated in my review video. And to be honest, since actually making that video, I've never once noticed that problem since then. This might be something that bothers other people when they see a green tint at the lower brightness levels, but for me personally, it's not even something that's risen to my own attention over the past like 4 or 5 months of owning this device.